They said love comes to those who give. So you did. You gave your time, your effort, your presence. You texted first. You planned the dates. You made room for her sometimes at the cost of yourself. And deep down, you believed that if you gave enough, she'd see your worth. But the more you gave, the more she faded. That silence you now feel. It's not confusion. It's the echo of a truth you didn't want to face. You made yourself too easy to reach. Not because you're weak. Not because you're wrong. But because no one ever told you the law beneath the surface. What's given too freely loses its weight. You were trying to love her. But what she felt was hunger. And hunger doesn't draw people in, it pushes them away. Machiavelli didn't write about romance. He wrote about power. But power at its root isn't dominance. It's presence, gravity, the kind that draws people without asking, without pleading. And somewhere along the way, you stopped being gravity. You started chasing. This isn't about turning cold. It's about remembering who the hell you are. You don't need to be chosen. You need to stop abandoning yourself just to be accepted. You're not here to impress her. You're here to become unforgettable, not through noise, but through depth. Not by explaining, but by embodying. So if you're ready to reclaim the edge you traded for comfort, if you're tired of asking what went wrong, lean in. This is not for the boy who still hopes she'll fix him. This is for the man who's ready to face himself. Let's begin. Rule 1. Stop chasing, start attracting. You think love is earned by effort. So you give. You reach. You adjust. You wait on her. And little by little, without even noticing, you stop living as the man you were and start performing as the man you hope she'll choose. But here's what she feels. Not your love, not your kindness, not your consistency. She feels the weight of your need. And that's when she begins to pull back. Not because you were wrong, not because you're unworthy, but because you gave too much too easily. What's freely given is rarely deeply valued. You see, in her world, attention is everywhere. 100 men try to prove they're worthy, but the one she remembers is the one who didn't need to. The man who didn't chase her. The man who made her wonder. The man whose world was already full. Because in a world of noise, restraint is rare. Machiavelli said, "It is much safer to be feared than loved if one must choose." But fear here isn't about threat. It's about presence. It's the man whose silence is more commanding than another man's compliments. The one who looks her in the eye and says, "I want you here, but I will never need you to complete me." That man is different. He doesn't rush. He doesn't explain. He doesn't need her to validate his value. And in that stillness, in that detachment, she feels something she can't feel from the ones who chase. Gravity. Because attraction doesn't grow where effort overwhelms. It grows in tension, in mystery, in absence that has meaning. The man who stops chasing doesn't become cold. He becomes clear. Clear in who he is. Clear in what he stands for. Clear in the fact that no woman defines his worth, because he already does. That's when everything shifts. Not because you played a game, but because you stopped playing yourself. So if you've been chasing, if you've been shrinking, if you've been waiting to be seen, let this be the moment you stop. Let this be the moment you return to your path, because the man who leads his life with direction doesn't need to pursue love. He draws it in, not with pressure, but with presence. Rule 2. Be a vault, not a vending machine. You thought transparency would make her stay, so you opened up. You shared your wounds, your past, your fears, hoping that honesty would create intimacy. But instead of pulling her closer, she pulled away. Why? Because you handed her the ending before she even earned the first chapter. You mistook vulnerability for exposure. But real vulnerability, the kind that builds connection, not pity, comes with timing, with strength, with boundaries. You don't win her respect by bleeding out every scar. You win it by having something sacred she must uncover. There is no story without mystery, no attraction without depth. Machiavelli warned us, a man who reveals all his intentions becomes predictable. And the predictable man is easy to forget, not because he lacks worth, but because he gave it all too soon. Every layer you give away without being asked, every thought you unpack without being earned, reduces you from a man she must understand to a man she already knows. And what's already known is rarely pursued. You're not here to be a live diary. You're not here to impress with overexposure. You are a vault, heavy, guarded, sacred, not because you're hiding, but because you value what's inside. You see, when a man gives everything too fast, it's not intimacy she feels. It's insecurity, because the man who spills too soon is usually afraid. Afraid she'll lose interest. Afraid he won't get another chance. Afraid he's not enough without the performance. But the man who waits, the man who lets silence speak, who allows discovery to unfold naturally, that man becomes unforgettable. She doesn't need all your secrets in the first act. She needs to sense there's more to wonder about, more to earn. Because desire is born in discovery, and discovery can't happen if there's nothing left to uncover. So speak less, reveal slowly, let her curiosity grow. You don't have to say, here's everything I am. You just have to be so centered that she leans in to find out more. Because a man who is truly whole doesn't prove it. He simply lives it. And the deeper she has to go to find you, the more she'll value what she finds. Rule 3. Master emotional discipline. She pulled back, and something in you panicked. You didn't show it maybe, but inside you felt that cold drop, like falling from a height you never meant to climb. Your first instinct to fix it, to text more, to call, to chase clarity. But beneath all that action was fear, not of losing her, but of losing yourself. And that's what most men miss. She's not testing your patience. She's testing your center. Can you stay calm when the script changes? Can you hold your ground when affection is no longer guaranteed? Can you sit with uncertainty without begging for reassurance? Because the man who collapses at the first sign of distance was never standing tall to begin with. Machiavelli said, "The man who cannot govern his passions will soon be governed by others." That's not just about leadership. That's about attraction. If your emotions control you, she cannot trust you to hold her storm because you can't even hold your own. Stillness isn't the absence of emotion. It's the integration of it. The mature man feels the sting but doesn't flinch. He senses the doubt but doesn't reach for validation. He hears the silence but doesn't fill it with noise, because he's learned something most men never do. Reaction is weakness. Restraint is power. This isn't about being cold. It's about becoming the kind of man who stays intact, regardless of how the world moves around him. The man who doesn't bleed his feelings into every text. The man who doesn't chase every shift in her tone. The man who doesn't lose sleep over what he cannot control. He doesn't suppress the fire, he holds it. And in that stillness, he becomes the kind of presence that commands respect without ever asking for it. Because true masculinity isn't loud, it's composed. And the man who can sit in discomfort without losing his center becomes rare. And in a world full of noise, rarity is irresistible. Rule 4. Command respect with quiet strength. You thought letting it slide made you mature. That staying quiet when she crossed the line was the higher road. So you smiled when she canceled last minute, laughed when she mocked something that mattered to you, stayed silent when she flirted with the idea of leaving. You called it patience, but what it was erasure. Not of her boundaries, of yours. You confused tolerance with strength, and every time you let it slide, she didn't feel loved. She felt something else. Permission. Permission to treat you lightly, to test your edge and find there wasn't one. To see how far she could go before you'd finally draw a line and realize you never would. Because a man who won't stand for himself will never stand out in her eyes. Machiavelli warned, if you do not command respect, you invite betrayal. Betrayal doesn't always look like infidelity. Sometimes it looks like slow disregard, tiny moments where you vanish, bit by bit, until you don't recognize the man in the mirror anymore. Respect isn't loud. It doesn't raise its voice. It doesn't swing fists or threaten. It simply doesn't bend. The man who commands respect doesn't need to demand it. He lives in a way that makes disrespect impossible to sustain. Not through punishment, but through presence. He doesn't argue. He doesn't chase apologies. He doesn't explain why a line was crossed. He just walks, quietly, with dignity, with gravity. And in that moment, she feels the weight of what she thought she could take for granted. Not because he made her feel it, but because he no longer gave her access to the man she couldn't honor. You want to be unforgettable. Draw your lines. Hold them without anger. Enforce them without drama. Let her feel what it means to lose the right to your space. Because when you stop protecting your standards, you stop protecting your soul. And a man who doesn't guard his soul becomes invisible. So no, you don't need to yell. You just need to know who you are so deeply, so clearly, that anything less than respect is simply unwelcome. And when you live like that, you don't just earn respect. You become it. Rule 5. Don't explain, embody. You want her to understand you, to see the depth, the loyalty, the effort. So you explain, you justify, you prove. You talk about what you bring to the table. You spell out your intentions. You try to reassure her of your worth. But here's the truth. The man who explains why he's worthy is already afraid he isn't. And that fear doesn't go unheard. It speaks louder than your words ever could. Because she doesn't feel your value through promises. She feels it through presence, through the way you carry yourself when she's watching, and especially when she's not. Through the way you keep your word even when no one's checking. through your discipline, your focus, your refusal to bend for attention. Machiavelli didn't preach performance. He spoke of perception. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you truly are. And so the question is not, how do I make her believe in me? The question is, who am I when no one is looking? Because that's what shapes your energy. That's what creates the edge she can feel in your silence. You don't have to say I'm confident. It's in how you move. You don't have to say I'm focused. It's in how you prioritize your time. You don't have to say I won't be disrespected. It's in what you no longer tolerate. She doesn't need your explanation. She needs your embodiment. Let your life speak. Let your gaze speak. Let your stillness speak louder than any reassurance ever could. Because when you become the man who no longer needs to prove anything, everything about you begins to prove itself. And that is what makes her feel you. Not as noise, but as presence. Not as performance, but as power. Rule 6. Control perception. Guard the frame. Machiavelli understood something most men still ignore. Men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few really know what you are. He wasn't promoting deception. He was revealing reality. Perception shapes power. And in modern love, it shapes attraction. You can be loyal. You can be kind. You can be deeply sincere. But if the frame she sees you through is weak, it won't matter, because perception is the frame. And the man who doesn't guard his frame is constantly reacting to hers. Here's the truth. Every relationship has a frame, a dominant narrative, and someone is always setting it. Most men surrender it without knowing. They explain too much. They chase clarity. They apologize for wanting more, and slowly, invisibly, they step into her world. They think they're being respectful, but what she feels is a man who's lost his position. A man who bends. A man who adjusts. A man who no longer shapes the dynamic but follows it. And when a man follows the frame, he's no longer leading anything. So how do you reclaim it? You stop chasing meaning in her reactions and start setting meaning with your presence. You stop trying to get her to understand you and start living in a way that makes you undeniable. This isn't about manipulation. It's about clarity, about knowing who you are, what you value, what you won't tolerate, and holding that line without flinching. The man who commands the frame is not the loudest. He's not the smartest. He's not the most charming. He's the one who knows who he is and never leaves that position. And because of that, she leans in. She follows. She respects. Not because you forced her to, but because you became the kind of man who makes following feel safe. Rule 7. Protect your mission. Stay sovereign. There's a quiet moment, barely noticeable at first, when your schedule starts bending, when your habits begin slipping, when you stop doing the things that made you feel alive, all because being close to her feels more urgent than being close to yourself. And you tell yourself it's love, that this is what sacrifice looks like, that putting her first is what a good man does. But slowly, without meaning to, you trade your edge for approval. You wake up one day, and the man who once had fire now waits for permission to light it again. That's not love. That's surrender. Not of affection, of sovereignty. And Machiavelli warned you, a prince must always rule his domain. If he does not, someone else will. Your domain is not just your career. It's your soul, your standards, your structure. the sacred rhythm of your mission. And if you abandon it for comfort, someone else will rule it, even if that someone is her, even if she never asked to. Because when a man loses himself, he forces her to carry what was never hers to hold. No woman wants to be your compass. She wants to see that you already have one and choose to walk beside it. She fell in love with the man who moved forward, not the man who paused to follow her. So protect your rituals, guard your progress, keep the promises you made to yourself, because every time you skip the gym, every time you silence your truth to avoid tension, every time you delay your dream to make her feel secure, you teach the world that you are a man who negotiates his throne. And once you do that, you don't just lose her interest, you lose yourself. This isn't about being rigid. It's about being rooted. The man who lives from mission doesn't need control. He already has direction. And direction, real direction, commands the room, commands respect, and ultimately commands desire. You don't need to yell. You don't need to prove. You just need to keep building. And in that building, she'll feel it. This man cannot be moved. And that stillness, that purpose, it makes her feel something no performance ever could. Safe. Not because you need her, but because you don't need to lose yourself to keep her. You are not hers to mold. You are the mountain she chooses to rise toward. So stand, unapologetically, because the man who refuses to abandon his mission becomes the one no woman dares to forget. So now you see, she didn't pull away because you weren't enough. She pulled away because you forgot you already were. You made her your source, but she was never meant to be your sun. She was meant to orbit the fire you build. You thought love was something you win, but love is never a prize. It's a reflection, and a woman does not reflect the man who chases. She reflects the man who stands, still, silent, certain. You don't attract her by reaching. You attract her by remembering who you are and living like it. Let her feel your gravity, not your desperation. Let her earn access to the man you've become, not consume the boy who gave himself away to be chosen. This isn't about getting her back. It's about getting yourself back. If something stirred in you, if a quiet part of your soul just sat up straighter, don't let this pass. Make a soul-level decision. Comment below, I protect my crown. And if you have a brother who's still chasing, who's still breaking himself to feel enough, send this to him. Because sometimes a single truth can save a man from the story that was never his to live. Subscribe not for me, for the man you're becoming. Because that man, he doesn't perform. He doesn't plead. He doesn't need to be liked. He is respected. Not for what he says, but for what he embodies, because his silence, it speaks. And no woman forgets the man who moves the world without ever leaving his throne.